This is Dan Cordapassi of TSG Multimedia. Welcome to HO Weathering and Detailing, Volume 3. In this program, I'm going to show you some of the techniques that I use to weather and detail HO scale diesels, to turn a locomotive that looks like this into one that looks like this. I've included a variety of diesels from different eras and regions to try to demonstrate as many different techniques as possible. Each example was carefully chosen to illustrate at least one thing that makes it different from the others. Even if the particular diesel you'd like to model isn't represented, you can still apply the techniques to achieve the effect you're after. Since locomotives have to operate as well as look good, in addition to weathering and detailing, I'll also discuss lighting, sound, and in some cases small modifications that enhance the locomotive's performance. There's no right or wrong way to approach anything in a hobby, but when modeling diesels I found it makes sense to follow a sequence of steps. These may vary a bit from model to model, but are a good general guideline. I start with research, gathering as many photos of the locomotive I want to model as I can find. Before doing any work, I make a plan and decide how much I want to change. Once I have an idea of what I want to do, I compare my model to the photos and see if there are any details that need to be added or changed. Next, I do any necessary disassembly and removal of incorrect details or markings. Once the model is stripped of unwanted parts, I start adding new details and making modifications that may be necessary for sound and lighting. This is also the time to touch up the paint and add new decals if necessary. Finally, I reassemble the model and apply weathering. I have been a model railroader for a long time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I think my way is the only way to do things. I'm going to show you how I work, and at the very least, hopefully you'll get some ideas. Tools I use include a hobby knife, needle nose pliers, wire cutters, trip pin pliers, small screwdrivers, tweezers, a pin vise, a motor tool, a soldering iron, an NMRA standards gauge and Katie coupler height gauge, an assortment of paintbrushes, microbrushes, sandpaper, files, and disposable gloves. An airbrush and compressor, preferably one with a tank and regulator valve, are also very useful. Supplies I keep on hand include Katie couplers, detail parts, brass rod and styrene sheet, fiber optic strands, LEDs, solder, insulating materials, RTV silicone, masking tape, decals, decal fluid, model paints, weathering powders, colored pencils, solvents, and adhesives. So let's get started.